Like all the great railway towns, Eastleigh has seen better days. These works were built in the era of Dougal Drummond a century ago, and now time is claiming them back. But not everything is gone. Making tracks to where it was rebuilt in 1959, Clan Line comes hurrying south through Eastleigh Station on a sunny Sunday. Her destination is Southampton Docks. In the background, beyond the tall ship, is the bulk of what used to be the South Western Hotel, where Victorians could alight from their boat train in the foyer. The grace and grandeur is long gone. Now you have to look hard at the floating boxes to recognise them as ships at all. Once there was a complete fleet of steam locos here, the dock shunters of the USA class. Typically of steam, a few survived the loss of habitat, and this one is still bustling about on the Kent and East Sussex Railway. In steam days, with a class of 14 of these to look after the engine shed in the docks, 71I could have serviced a visiting merchant navy. But now things are more tricky for straying steam locos. After being released from the train and from her support coach, Clan Line prepares to set sail on the long journey of her own backwards. For a few moments at least, road gives way to rail as the big engine reverses over the ungated crossing at Canute Road. The driver today has been involved with steam for 50 years. Rodney Tizard's career as an engineman at Eastleigh spanned an era of great change. That he should be reversing along the main line in one of Bulleid's Pacifics at the twilight of his career is something no one would have predicted when Clan Line was withdrawn in 1967. He's taking the engine all the way back to Eastleigh. The 7-mile journey is being made simply to turn the engine, for there still exists a loop of track that runs right round the perimeter of the Eastleigh depot. By setting off forwards and then turning left in the Fareham direction, he can run all the way round a mile-long loop back into Eastleigh and then reverse to the docks. The poignancy of this journey isn't lost on the engine men, for Clan Line is back where she was rebuilt. All 30 of the class lost their spam can casing here in the late 50s. Now it's a motley fleet of diesels that have reached the end of the line, unless someone cares to preserve them. Clan Line emerges from what remains of the great engine shed, where once she rubbed shoulders with Nelsons and Arthurs and Schools in a glorious jumble of southern steam. As she approaches the lines that stretch away towards Bournemouth and Weymouth, she meets, briefly, one of her successors. One day, HSTs will earn their place in preservation, but what they'll never have is the individual personality that each steam locomotive possesses.
I suppose if I had to sort of put it in a word, I would say Clan Line's a bit of an introvert, because she never makes a lot of noise. There's a chattering noise from the chimney even when she's working very hard. But quite often she can slip through the landscape and people won't even hear her coming or notice. A quiet engine that just gets on and does the job and keeps up with the modern railway.
The evening sunshine catches her exhaust as Clan Line powers away from Northern Junction with the return working to Victoria. There are still enginemen around who can remember merchant navies in brand new, unrebuilt form.
When we had the new at Bournemouth, up to that point in time we had Lord Nelson's as our mainline engines, and then in 1949 we had 6 Bully Pacific Merchant Navy class, and I was moved up into the mainline link, and my own engine was Port Line, which is 35027, and the driver I worked with was a man named Frank Carter, and he was the finest engineman I'd ever had the privilege to work with. They were very light on coal with the right driver. I mean, the drivers made a lot of difference, and we could go, when I went to London, I could stop firing at Winchester and I could go the rest of the way without putting any coal on with that driver. And he would use the minimum amount of water, and he was the only driver I worked with that wouldn't take water at Southampton on the way to London. We had a big tender and no, we don't want water, mess about and take water. And always when we got to Waterloo, we had more than half a tank of water left.
By an amazing coincidence, Port Line has ended up at the Swanage Railway, where Stan Symes is the senior driver, so engine and ex-fireman are reunited after half a century. Also by coincidence, Port Line was due back in traffic at about the same time as her younger sister's mainline ticket runs out. But 35027 won't be roaming the network like 35028. Today, Clan Line is rostered onto her bread and butter duty, a luncheon special along the line of the Surrey Hills. She's taking the VSOE stock for a leisurely ramble through Guildford and Red Hill. In fact, as she approaches Guildford, the Orient Express staff will just be serving the main course. For this is Meals on Wheels, with a difference. Clanline's footplate staff are mainly concerned not to spill anyone's soup, and also to keep the engine quiet on this easy bit of the journey. There'll be some energetic exercise after lunch, but first, the usual water stop at the beginning of the Dorking and Red Hill line, one of those bits of the Southern Railway that was never electrified. In steam days, there were regular workings by Western engines from Reading. It's a cross-country route avoiding London whose potential was never fully exploited, but in these days of vanishing capacity, Clanline is glad of an available path along a route near London. For a few minutes, passengers at Shalford Station are treated to the organised chaos of a water stop. It's a colourful travelling circus that will soon roll on somewhere else. John Neal is at the controls, with Don Clark on the shovel, and Traction Inspector Dennis Donovan acting as our guide to the action on the footplate.
Okay, we've got about 4 miles now uphill, about 1 in 100. Some of it 1 in 96. If she wants to move, that is. Come on, Bill. Shout nice and loud then. Yes, will do. Yes, here we go. One slip, one slip. What's our tonnage, John? What's your paper there? Firebox needs the back corners filled up. Got about 2.5, 3 foot either side there. If you lose that, you'll have cold air coming up. And at the moment, you've got a good pressure. Look at that, see the cameraman on the line side there, no vest. That's the steam heater pipe to warm the train up, warm the coach. You regulate that. Go on, Don, you work on your fire. She's coming round nicely now. There we go. Right, now we've got a full regulator. That's all about. Actually doing well. Only 40% cut off.
All 3 of these engine men were working on the Southern in steam days. In fact, Dennis passed his driving test on a Bulleid, number 34088, so there isn't a better judge of the breed.
Every engine, even though it's the same class, it gets treated differently, you know. I mean, our Tor Valley behind us, you can bring her right up into 15 and she'll steam quite freely. That is to say, that's the cut-off, you know, you're shortening the stroke. In other words, when you start away in a car, you start away in first gear and slowly bring them up into top gear. And the same thing applies to steam engines. You actually bring them up into mid-gear until you're actually racing. The cut-offs, you don't hear that when you're doing 70 mile an hour, do you? See, so you're uptight. But Tor Valley will stand for it. You know, you can bring her up nice and tight up into the middle. But if you do that with Clanline, it baffles it a little bit. So we found that out by an error. We found we was working a train once, so we brought her up inside 25, 15, and she wasn't steaming quite so freely. So what we do now, we drop her out beyond, outside 25, and she'll hold her pressure there. That is why, when we was going up the bank from Shalford there, she didn't move. She never moved, that needle, and that was against the injector. I think they give us an average speed of about 36 mile an hour up there for 4 miles, which isn't bad for that type of load. You know. She slipped a couple of times. There is a cutting up there somewhere near a crossing. The leaves, the trees, you get the leaves come down, and if you're not ready for it, there, she will lose her feet. And she did that on a particular day, but she got up there all right. She got there without assistance. That is, without assistance. You know.
The power of bullids is easy to underestimate, partly because they don't make as much noise at the chimney as most designs.
The great glory of a Bullid Pacific, which gives it the power that it does have, is that the front end of the locomotive is very efficiently designed. All the pipes that carry the steam from the boilers to the cylinder are large and streamlined so that there's no internal resistance. The cylinders use the steam very efficiently, and finally it is exhausted through a very large chimney so that all the energy is spent in the cylinders and not wasted making a huge noise at the chimney top.
Quiet exhaust or not, they're still a gripping spectacle in full flow. Stan Symes rates them highly among the astonishing total of 100 different classes he's driven.
From a driving point of view, they're powerful, very responsive, very comfortable to drive, got a good cab, plenty of room. The steaming qualities are excellent. There's never any fear of being short of steam with them. And they had a character of their own. They were quite different than anything else that we'd ever had before. Then they only had one drawback, and that was the visibility, because they had a habit of forcing the steam downwards, either one side or the other. So you could go to London, and at one side the driver would see nothing at all, and in the reverse direction the fireman saw nothing.
This dynamic duo laid down a smokescreen all the way from London to Margate, where they came to rest on an enthusiast special. But what was the identity of the Merchant Navy class train engine, which was being piloted by the familiar Tor Valley of the West Country class? Alas, Belgian Marine didn't survive. Someone had paid for the privilege of seeing a ghost. Clanline was posing as 35017. Double-headed driving is an art form all of its own.
In my case, the train engine, I'm subordinate to the guy on the leading engine. He controls the brake, and all I do is apply power as I think he is. When he shuts off, I shut off power. There's no working in multiple with steam locomotives.
Later in the day, they raced all the way back to London, and there was great interest over how they'd cope with the long climb out of the River Medway Valley at Soul Street Bank. 15p is a lot of pulling power. Just watch how people step back in amazement. But this wasn't the only time Clan 9 travelled under an alias. On a glorious winter's morning at the birth of the new millennium, she was at it again, using a false name. Glinting in the sunshine was the ghost of Union Castle. Clan Line had been renamed for the shipping line's centenary, and though she missed the actual date with superheater problems, the engine was making up in style for a rare lapse. Having flashed down from London in crystal clear light, the engine paused briefly at Eastleigh before reappearing off shed after turning. One of the things commented on by those enthusiasts watching from the station platform was just how dramatically an engine's appearance and character can be changed by a different nameplate and by different numbers. The whole look of the machine is somehow different. Union Castle's shining moment came and went, and the evocative name passed once more into the sunset of history. But the headboard was carried more than once. This is Clan Line appearing as herself, accelerating hard out of Basingstoke. It was a young driver from Basingstoke Shed who set up one of the Merchant Navy's speed records in the dying days of steam.
We worked out of Salisbury up to the Greatley, and then we went over the top at Greatley, and then getting down to Redpost Junction, we were clocking 103, and that's what we were. And then I decided it was time to stop because Andover wasn't too far away, and we were stopping in Andover. So yeah, and it was actually clocked at that, and you know, as you say, I was a young lad. I was, what was I then? I was 29 years old, and I've just done over 100 mile an hour on this steam engine, driving this steam engine. And when I stopped in Andover, they all charged, all the spotters were on there, they all charged out the train, they want to take your photograph out of the engine. And the engine I had was 35008. And the guy come charging up and he said, 35008 is reputed to be the worst merchant navy of the lot. What do you got to say about that? I said, give me the best one.
For comparatively small-wheeled express engines, the Bullids were fast, and that was because they'd run on a sniff of steam.
If you are really on the move, you can pull your lever up to about 15% with a Merchant Navy or West Country, and which is quite sufficient. And that engine will be at its best at that point. You can get the speed. A Merchant Navy or a West Country are quite capable of 90 miles an hour, even more if you wanted to, but that that was always our maximum, 90 miles an hour. So officially, we never exceeded it.
There remains the question of why the entire Merchant Navy class had to be rebuilt from this shape to a less radical final form. Are the critics unfair to Bullitt?
It is most unfair. Chains were used for power transmission all over static engineering applications, and there was no reason to suppose that they wouldn't work in a railway engineering application. And I think, given plenty of time to sit down and work the design out in the cool of the evening, it could have worked better than it did. But you have to remember that it was designed in the middle of a world war, when every second was precious and they had to get the engines into traffic to help with the war effort. And it was the first stab at the design, and it had a few rough edges. I think you would have to say that Bullitt was a man ahead of his time. He really, if you like, designed the first ergonomic steam locomotive in terms of ease of operation of the cab controls for the crew. He set out to make the steam locomotive as easy to maintain as possible. I think he realised that it would never be as easy to maintain as a diesel locomotive, but he was determined to have a damn good crack at keeping them going as long as he could. We've long since passed the point at which we've owned the engine for longer than British Railways did. She has to earn her living. Every 7 years we have to do a major overhaul on the engine, and it costs every penny that we can earn in the 7 years of running.
During those 7 years of running, Clanline has travelled widely, an ambassador for mainline steam. And who knows how many thousands of people must have witnessed her passing and felt enriched by the sight of this superb machine.